Hello, this is Giles Edwards, and I'm sitting down with Drew, producer of Rondo. Drew, producer of Rondo, and Guy.
No, Drew's the director.
Oh God, this is terrible. All right, Drew Barnhardt, the director of Rondo, and Guy, something producer.
Yeah.
Guy Clark.
Guy Clark. Wonderful. Got there in the end. Now, this was the international premiere last night of your motion picture.
World premiere.
World
First time
premiere.
anyone's seen the thing.
Anyone seen the thing? I guess I'll start off with the significance of the title. I know it's used within the movie. What made you choose that word?
There's a few influences for the title. One, obviously, the movie has a lot to do with Hitchcock, and we love the one-word titles, whether it's Vertigo, Frenzy, Topaz, Psycho, obviously, you name it, we like that. Also, I'm a big basketball fan. I like the player Rondo, and it seemed like a natural for the code word of our heavies, and then I always say Rondo just seems like a fun word to say.
It's a very good answer. Now, last night during the Q&A, you mentioned 4 intersecting points of style. I wonder if you'd like to talk about that for people who
Yes,
didn't get the context.
I considered it my 4-quadrant movie. We're trying to break into the mainstream, of course, with this. So the 4 quadrants being Hitchcock, De Palma, Peckinpah, and then Pornhub.
I can see the Peckinpah. I can see the De Palma. Certainly the Hitchcock. Care to expand on the 4th quadrant?
What was the 4th one? No. Yes, no, it was too much time spent laughing at some of the titles for these Pornhub clips that always cracked me up. And I was like, okay, we can have some fun with some of this behavior.
Obviously, there are elements of pornography
Yes.
in your movie, and so I guess that was.
There's that too. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the humor of the formality of,
Yes.
of the, there's a sort of a setup for the orgy in the beginning, sort of that
Yeah.
being formal in the language and like the setting rules is sort of the humor I think
Yeah.
kind of came out of that.
There's something funny to us about using elaborate formalities to describe something so base and crude.
Yes, there was one review I read a little bit of that remarked that if one saw anything in that sort of opening speech, it would easily land you an X or
Indeed.
further rating.
Indeed.
Whereas now I imagine you're, well, I suspect beyond R, but
Yeah.
not sure. I imagine you'll go by with an unrated for.
So far, no one's asked us to made cuts, but also so far, no one's bought it. So.
If you mentioned last night that you were going to be firm about not
Yes.
making cuts, so you
Certainly, we wanted. It is what it is. We weren't trying to make anything other than what it is and what it became. And part of its strength, if it does have strengths, that is, part of it is the fact that it's pretty uninhibited, and it's not predictable in terms of people don't know where it's going or how far it might go. And I think that's one of the strengths when you have no movie stars or no big budget. Just to try to be as unpredictable and uninhibited for the audience as you possibly can.
And rewinding a bit, how did you both start your career in heading toward cinema as a calling?
Well, we both started making our own little movies, with video cameras and Super 8 stuff when we were little kids. And we ultimately met at film school. We ended up being roommates and did all of our stuff together there. And since film school, we both went our separate directions, trying to make our own projects in sort of the professional landscape, and of course, plenty of bitter disappointments and soul-crushing close calls, to get things made, and years upon years and years of that. And so frustration finally boiled over and said, fine, we don't have any money, but let's just do something that's just us, and no one's getting us notes or dealing with that stuff.
Now, you say you didn't have any money. Obviously, making any given movie costs something, and with a project like this, I imagine you started with the screenplay. And how did you? So, someone must be investing in this.
Yes.
How did you attract their attention and convince
Our
them?
principal investor I went to high school with, and he is much more successful than I, and yet he was in all my high school movies. And so he is a businessman, went on and did really well in his field. He always came back saying, we still need to make a movie one day. And it's his nice apartment that you see in the movie, so he offered us that location, and he was like our main investor. That got the thing off the ground.
And you as producer, did you bring anyone else into this, or?
No, it was just more the creative,
Yeah.
and then just the force of sheer will to get this made, because we sort of talked about it for a year with the writing, and then just getting it done. It was just basically the two of us. So no, in terms of we didn't want to spend a lot of money because we wanted to make, you know, we didn't want it to like not, you know, come out of this okay, break
Right.
even and whatnot. So it was very sort of, where can we put every dollar on the screen?
And both of us as directors have had experiences with very problematic producers in the past. And so that was part of my reason, because again, we're close friends, and there was no one else that I felt like I could trust to be, you know, right there the whole way through.
And you remarked last night that you sort of have a bunch of no-name actors. You did a bunch of auditions locally in Boulder, Colorado? Denver, Colorado. But I can't remember the character's name or the actor's name. The black gentleman who gives the speeches.
Yes, his name is Reggie DeMorton. He's an old veteran actor. You probably heard Mitch talk about my short film that played here like 12 years ago, and he was the lead of that. And so and he was in a couple of our film school stuff going way back when. He was still old then, though. And, so he's been with us for a while, and we flew him out from Los Angeles to Denver where we shot it, just because we knew he'd be funny.
Did you at all write the role with him in mind?
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
I was going to say it seemed very
specific.
Yes, very natural to him. It's like.
Well, and it's always fun for me to like give him multi-syllabic words.
Oh. Yes, he has a sense of diction that is
a certain cadence. That's
because I looked briefly at his bio. Radio is one of the places he's worked in, so I could definitely feel that this, you know, could be a voiced. But speaking of radio, one of my favorite choices you made was the narrator.
Oh, cool.
It says I was a film major, and one of the courses I took was documentary, and sort of trying to break it apart and looking at it objectively. And one of the things was the omniscient narrator.
Absolutely.
And the trustworthiness. What was it sort of for ease of clarifying or joke counterpoint? What prompted the narrator character to show up?
Well, at the basis level, I obviously am in love with Kubrick and his stuff, and his use of the, particularly Barry Lyndon and the Michael Horder narration in that has always been like my favorite thing ever. As far as the voice went, though, we were going for a Peter Thomas type who does the voiceover for Forensic Files and Nova, and then we wanted something very officious for this, you know, kind of crude, you know, material.
The absurdity of it all, to kind of, because otherwise the beginning kind of plays like melodrama without the sort of the humor of the narration.
Yeah, the narration definitely heightens, and certainly the detachment from it. So you're not like in the middle of melodrama and this and that, and the narration gives you that good distance where, okay, I can step back and hopefully recognize more of the absurdity, or at least I don't have to. I'm not intended to be invested in this melodrama that started in 2 minutes with characters that you're not familiar with and don't know. And plus, just Kubrick's use, whether it's even the opening of Strangelove or everything in Barry Lyndon, that it's just funny. And, it's a great way to create a, what would you call it, an emotional detachment, or a more removed way of looking at the material, as opposed to, you know, trying to force some melodrama down people's throats.
Because imagine if your movie were stripped of the narrator and most of the sound cues, it would play infinitely differently.
Yes,
It would
indeed.
be just sort of bleak, bleak, bleak.
Right.
Terrible. Oh dear God. Oh, I'm so sad. Oh, great.
Right.
And I guess the sound cues. You said you knew the score composer for the longest time, and you just wrote sound cue. How did you indicated you wrote the sound cues in the script. Did you give any impression, give any direction to the score composer within that script, or did you just fingers crossed?
Yeah, it's strange. It used to be like real specific with temp cues and things like that, but since we know each other so well now it's more like, okay, something. We started listening to a lot of Desplat score for Venus and Furs, the
Yeah.
Polanski movie, with the augmented percussion and strength. We really like that. But then we also, there's one cue in there that's clearly born of me and Ryan loving the score to the Warriors that Barry DeVorzon did. And we didn't have to like say it between each other. We both knew at this point what we were talking about. And he has that, he brings his own influences too, like that whole murder thing is a very John Hopkins type thing, who he was into at the time, in terms of electronica that so pulls. That's like the orgy murder and all that stuff. And let's see what else. I attempt a lot of it with like Dvorak and different waltzes and things. My first idea was that it was going to be mostly waltz based. Again, a Kubrick affectation, I guess. But and then of course he brings his own ideas. So it'll say in the script, you know, waltz begins here or things like that. That's about as specific as we got in the script.
And I mentioned Kubrick, De Palma, Peckinpah. I want to ask for my own sake,
Please.
are you at all interested or influenced by Peter Greenaway?
I've loved his movies. I wouldn't say he was a conscious influence on this, but as a visualist, he's amazing. And,
Yeah, because there were a lot of, I guess, the mannered cinematography. A lot of
Totally.
the shots reminded me of Peter Greenaway's Zed and Two Knots in particular, with a lot of specific look. And, you know, setting it up more like a painting
a tableau than is.
than
It's funny you mention that, and part of that is out of necessity because the camera we ended up using was a giant monster. It was, so like you're not going to get a lot of the De Palma elegant steady cam shots and things because you couldn't move it. So then suddenly you had to be very specific about where you put it and then how you block the actors in. So it became a lot more of a tableau style than maybe was even originally intended.
Out of necessity,
Yeah.
probably, because we couldn't afford a steady cam. and
Yeah,
that sort of thing,
exactly.
yeah.
and I guess going into that, in particular the scene toward the end when the young actor, Jill, the young actress who plays Jill, is sitting on the chair while the nonsense is going on around her. How did you find Jill? Because she sort of, it's interesting, in the first half of the movie, she's just sort of in the background.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, she is
It's
the
her movie.
yeah.
And another, she just came in. We didn't know her. It was her very first movie.
She was in school.
She was in
still
college
at
yeah.
Boulder.
And she hadn't even done like short films or anything. She was this is her completely green. Came in new, and because of that, she like was a machine memorizing all these like pages and pages of dialogue, and actually saved our ass a few times where we're falling behind. And because she had these 3 pages, we're like, oh god, this is going to be rough. But she just knew it all, and she was so eager and excited about doing it. And
We were nervous about the material
Yes,
too.
yeah,
like,
that's
you
obviously-
know,
yes.
She
so
has that
we're-
one speech similar to
the little symmetry
Regula
there.
Martin.
Yes.
And
Yeah, the graphic language. We were nervous that people might not get the humor or the absurdity of it, and so in the audition process, it was like we had to be very clear.
Yeah,
Okay, are
we
you
were-
comfortable
We
saying
were
this
worried
stuff?
people were going to think we were perverts instead of perverts with a sense of humor.
if you were to describe the type of person that this movie is for, how would you describe that person?
They're sleeping right now. so-
Handsome?
So yourself.
Yeah, right, yeah, clearly. Yeah, I mean, I think it's this weird combination of, there's a certain cinema literacy to it, I like to think, but also someone who eschews pretension of some of the so-called highfalutin, films where a taste for exploitation, but also a degree of cinema literacy. So, God, who is that? I don't know. I hope there's
Well, it's probably us.
yeah, I hope there's more than us 3 out
We're
there.
here. Oh, well,
And I hope one of them is just loaded with money.
your friend doesn't want to finance your next feature too.
If he gets his money back, we might. We'll come back much harder. Whoever we didn't offend with this one, we're going to rectify that.
Oh, that's right. You mentioned also something you're working on.
Yeah.
It's, I take that in the screenwriting
Yes,
process
exactly.
right now, and
Exactly.
you're going to go for darker. Can
Yes.
you? Obviously, you don't want to talk too much about it since it's in progress. But considering how dark Rondo is, what are you going
What
to
constitutes
elevate?
darker?
Yeah.
I'd say a certain dry take on some of the most vile possible crimes that from the.
It's a familiar genre.
like a true crime genre. It's not a true story, but like the true crime genre, but with a like if what Doctor Strangelove was to fail safe, you know, we want to do to the true crime genre. Sorry, I didn't mean to just compare myself to Stanley Kubrick.
No, that's all.
That's not what I meant.
There are plenty more pretentious people than us out there, I assure you. Yeah, I don't know exactly how long I have with you right now.
Whatever you like.
Okay. Do you know if you were lined up with?
No, you're our guy today,
Yeah.
because they want to do a bunch of phone stuff. We just said wait till next week.
Yeah, ours.
So.
Oh, okay. So I'll have to dig a little deeper. I guess while I let my brain think, one question I do like to ask my interviewees: hometown restaurant. Can you recommend one?
Absolutely. Well, I'll let Guy go first because he's from.
I'm from Woodstock, Illinois, the boyhood home of Orson Welles and the location of Groundhog Day, the movie they shot there while I was growing up. For you film fans.
Basically the diner from Groundhog Day.
Right. There's a bar called Liquid Blues. It's
That's
like
right.
a basement bar, fish fry on Fridays. It's delicious. You know, we're up near Wisconsin border up there, so.
And I'm from Denver, which has a nice little budding culinary scene. Last season, Top Chef, all in Denver, which was great. And if you're going fine dining, you can't go wrong with Cholon, Cholon. It's fantastic, and definitely have the soup dumplings and the lobster crepes. Let's see.
Sushi.
Oh, Sushi Den. Yeah,
Sushi
Sushi
Den.
Den is amazing.
It's like 6 blocks from where we filmed
Yeah.
much of the film in that place.
I mean, how bizarre is it that the best sushi I've had is in a landlocked state like Colorado, but this place is amazing.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, it's something I found people like to talk about.
I love it.
Hometown.
Absolutely. And the guy's wife is Spanish, so he's spent the last few months just eating tapas. Like,
Yeah, Barcelona. So we've just been eating and eating.
In regards to, I guess, going back to Reggie de Morton,
yes.
what prompted your idea for the business that he would be in?
Well, part of the thing that's cool, always has been cool about Reggie, because he's so personable, just in general as a guy, that it's always been a challenge to give him the most fucked up dialogue that you can think of. That's how he was in my short Herbie. He was a murderer in that. And part of it was like, okay, what vile things can we make Reggie say and still have him be likable? Let's really test him this time. Like, okay, Reggie, say all this stuff and still be your personable self.
And bland villains too, like watching movies where the villains sort of like you don't really hate them, you don't really dislike them, just having villains that you know.
And I will have to say, yes, that one line where he says, God, I hate white people. And Reggie was like, I don't hate white people. I'm like, Reggie, this is not you. This is the guy.
Well, I suppose that makes me think there's a conflict there, because he says he hates white people, but he's married to a white person and is planning on having a child with this white person.
Yes, indeed.
So,
Yeah,
a mixed message from Reggie.
I'd say that philosophically he's a little confused. Somewhere he made a wrong turn in this whole maturation of his ideas and beliefs.
Because I'm sort of wondering, what high school guidance counselor sets you on the career path that gets you to where Reggie and company might be.
The counselor comes and visits that day. Like, what would you like to do? I would like to kill a lot of women in a short period of time.
For a lot of money.
It's for money.
I suppose it's some people's dream job.
He likes his work.
I take it you were pleased with the reaction last night for the movie?
Well, again, being the first time seeing it with an audience, I didn't know what to expect at all, and I was real nervous for most of it, of course, and not sure if people were completely bored to tears or if they were into it or not. And it wasn't until like the reactions started getting more vocal as the movie went on that I started to relax a little bit. Like, okay, at least they're paying attention. I don't think they're completely checked out. So yes, I was ultimately thrilled that that we weren't chased out of town.
Oh, good. You mentioned before we got in the interview room, you've had some offers for distribution.
No, those are like other festivals.
Oh, they're festival offers. Okay. So
we do have a sales rep who is sending the movie around now, and we'll see if anyone's interested. If they want to let this thing seep out into the world and infect others.
Because there was to a different review I read of this while trying to do some homework for this interview was difficult to pin down the genre.
Totally, it's a hard sell. It's kind of an odd duck. We've been saying thriller. I always say black comedy, but thriller is probably the easiest shortcut to it, or suspense comedy. I don't know. What would you call it? I should be asking you this question.
I'd go for black comedy, but then again, I've watched a lot of odd films,
Right.
and the people I work for are seeking out odd films. And this is actually the kind of thing that, okay, this is a black comedy, and then it's got obviously elements.
It has genre.
It's got crime genre. It's got certainly a visual look for it, a sort of a hyper noir kind of thing,
Sure.
but in color, obviously. So
It's got,
black comedy, noir thriller.
yes, a white thriller, a black comedy.
To bring back that terrible racism.
Yes, vile race. But I think it has a lot of the trappings of the suspense genre, but clearly, as I mentioned last night, that the humor was always the guiding principle of it.
And I did like the one flourish. Obviously, it didn't last for him, but you had smoking save a man's life.
Ah.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
true.
I never thought about that one.
I'm a degenerate smoker.
So yeah, I guess.
Good point.
Thank you. It was like, oh, okay, yep. He goes in, goes out, sees in. Okay,
It's
he
like,
lives
okay.
because he smokes.
If only he went to have a cigarette 10 minutes later.
Well, I guess that's probably all I've got for you right now, other than to
Giles,
say
thank you.
I very much enjoyed the motion picture. Was very glad to see the
did
full
you actually
house.
like it?
Oh,
Okay, sweet. I didn't want to come right out and ask.
yes. I started my review for it last night, so I'll probably be banging that out today.
Well,
and I'll be getting it up.
I can't tell you, it's much appreciated because obviously this thing needs a little help. It's a hard sell.
It's a very hard sell, but I'm sure you knew that.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
kind of knew it.
Yeah.
But then there's a certain amount of self-delusion that you have to do just to make any movie. You have to lie to yourself a lot that people are going to like this. And I don't think it really came crashing down on us until like in the editing where it's like, oh yeah, this is totally fucked.
Well, it was a good. You had a lighter touch than some because there are a lot of movies that go into that unfortunate genre, the sort of torture porn kind of
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
Like you had
We're not fans.
Hostel and Frontiers from.
Sure.
We didn't want to punish the audience.
Yeah,
At
that's-
least the audience we're trying to reach. We're not looking to punish them. We're looking to
That
make
was,
them laugh.
and Guy will expand on that because we talked about that a lot. About we're not trying to make the audience wallow in depravity. Hopefully have them laugh at the depravity.
Oh, it's 88 minutes or
Yes.
something like that. So it's a quick visit to something that most of us will probably never see in our lives. So that's
Indeed.
a
Hopefully
nice
not.
window for you to open.
Hopefully you're living your life the right way.
Denver tours
Unless you got stuck with that same guidance counselor that Reggie did. He just recommends that to everyone. It's not specific. It's like this guy, his guidance counselor. What did he tell you? He told me I was going to be a sex merchant. God, same thing.
So I was trying
I
to
must
think
have been
of that
cheating
job.
off your test.
Well, anyway, thank you both again, and best of luck because
Thanks,
I think
dude.
there are enough people out there to see it. I think for you guys to recoup your investments and maybe then some, because it's.
Fingers crossed.
I'll say it's very novel, which is more than can be said for a lot of movies.
Oh, we
that I've
definitely,
come
yeah,
across.
we're hoping that, one, we just didn't want to be predictable, we don't want to be boring, and it didn't want to be like everything else out there. Like I was laughing, I won't betray anyone's name, but they're saying they had to watch so many screeners, like if I have to watch one more screener about like evil Uber drivers.
Yeah, there's a tendency this festival, a lot of Southeast Asian dramas,
Oh,
a
yes.
lot of atmospheric gore horror things,
Yeah,
Atmospheric.
You mean
lot of manga adaptations or anime adaptations, and then little movies like yours spring up, and my hope is renewed.
that pop through, yes. Well, we're not. What's the line? The old Hollywood line: the ambience chasers. We're not that. We want to deliver like some not just mood and atmosphere. We hopefully want to give it a little punch to it, and hopefully make people laugh. We're not. Life's too short to be so dour about something as silly as movies are ultimately.
Yeah, I would not say, not describe your movie as serious.
No. Of course, we all, especially as film students, you go through that phase where you're going to change the world with film. And then you grow up a little bit, and it's like, let's just make something that's fun to watch. Something that's not punishing the audience.
Who knows, maybe further down the line, you'll look back on this as your Citizen Kane. As your,
Awesome.
And on that note,
you can leave the headline with that one, right?
and on that note, thank you, listeners, and thank you, Drew and Guy, director and producer
Thank you,
of
Giles.
Rondo. We wish you the best of luck.